With over 700 million internet users in the country and roughly 500 million yet to come online, India's digital economy is currently sitting on a goldmine of opportunity. The pandemic has accelerated the pace of digital adoption, and new age companies are not chance to win cash on the opportunity. Numbers tell us the story of how much the Indian startup landscape has changed. India stands second only to the US in building new unicorns this year. We've added 33 unicorns in 2021, establishing ourselves as a startup performer. The shift in the economy is clearly being driven by tech companies bringing innovative products and solutions to the market. What fundamentally differentiates these billion-dollar companies from others is the way that they leverage technology to disrupt the customer's experience. Catering to digital native consumers and offering them a differentiated experience, Indian entrepreneurs are rewriting India's economic roadmap. Hello and welcome to The Making with me, Shereen Bhan. Joining me today to discuss the road ahead for the Indian startup ecosystem, Rajat Parnmajan, Managing Director and Head of Commercial Banking at HSBC India, Amrit Acharya, Co-founder and CEO of Zetworks, one of the newly minted unicorns of 2021, and Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Co-founder at Newage, a veteran startup investor and someone who has helped create India's startup ecosystem. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Sanjeev, to start with, congratulations on the Padma Shri, and this is a moment not just for you personally, but for all of us who've been observing the changes over the past 2 decades for India's startup ecosystem. I want to start by asking you, Sanjeev, many people have described 2021 as a watershed moment, as a breakout moment, as the escape velocity moment for India's startup space. How would you sum up the journey so far and where we're poised today?
No, I think it is a watershed year. It is a breakout moment, but I would like to inject a word of caution to all the startup founders that listen, just focus on the fundamentals, do what makes business sense, and just figure out your plan B in case liquidity dries up. What will you do? Not that it's going to happen anytime soon. You can't predict, but who knows? Now, the other point I want to make is that, look, $4 trillion or $5 trillion or whatever has been injected into the global economy. This amount of money is unprecedented, and it makes everybody feel good and look smart, right? Our own valuation, our own share price, Newage, was about 22 or 2300 rupees, maybe just before the first lockdown, maybe around Feb. I forget the exact price. And now it's almost 3x of that. Now, are our fundamentals 3x better if you leave out yesterday's results? I don't know. But yeah, suddenly you've gone from, $3 billion market cap to $9 billion market cap, and you're feeling good about it, right? So a lot of it is liquidity driven, and I would therefore be wary before any startup founder begins to congratulate himself or herself on valuation. So focus on the underlying, focus on customer satisfaction, focus on real revenue, real margins, real business fundamentals, and the rest, the market decides. You don't decide.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The market decides, and at this point in time, the market is willing to give leeway to the kind of valuations that are being asked. Whether this party continues or not is the big question. But, on the fundamentals, Sanjeev, and while there is a disconnect to a large extent between valuations as well as how much the business has changed fundamentally, what do you believe have been the big levers that have turned positive for many of the Indian startups, especially the tech startups? I mean, customer acquisition costs have gone down primarily on account of the huge acceleration of digital adoption that we've seen. We've seen burn rates coming off. Whether that is going to be sustainable or not, we don't know. But fundamentally, forget valuations, fundamentally, what's changed for the story?
We released our results last night. And of course, we knew this for a while that things were picking up. But what is clear from our yesterday's results is that the bounce back is real and it's pretty sharp. So if you look at our numbers, they're looking pretty good. And we are seeing, and Naukri can be a sort of indicator of what's happening in each sector, because we actually get to see hiring. And we are seeing a bounce back coming across sectors, not just IT. It started with IT, but now it's getting more and more secular. So I think the bounce back is real. I think fundamentals are good. As digital adoption goes up and up, I think all digital businesses are benefiting a lot, right? So as long as there's no debilitating third wave, and it looks like, right now it doesn't look there'll be a debilitating third wave. There could be a third wave, but it may not be debilitating. because the vaccination program has been good. So I'm confident, and I'm cautiously optimistic that things will go on smoothly for the next several quarters.
Mhm. Yeah, so the bounce back is real, and the recovery that we're in the midst of is gaining further momentum. But Amrit, let me come to you now, as as a founder who's looking at opportunities and looking at unit economics as well as the headroom for potential growth. Where do you believe you find yourselves today? What's the last 3 years, 4 years experience been like? I mean, as I pointed out, you're one of the newly minted unicorns of 2021, and you're in the manufacturing solutions space. So take me through where things currently stand for you, and where do you believe you could be headed?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that, Shane. First of all, yeah, we're only a 3-year-old company, so for us, we have actually not seen some of those cycles that a lot of companies do see. But that being said, compared to like this time last year and now, what's happened in our business is what was perceived as a good to have, which was what we were offering, digital solutions for the manufacturing economy, suddenly became a must have. Like companies were not able to operate without this. This just became, we use words like new normal or different versions of that, and that's reflected in our numbers as well. Like last year, the business grew 3x year on year. This year, we're looking to grow at least 5 to 6x on a much larger base, and we're doing it with good economics. The company's turned profitable as of 6 months ago. So I believe in what was previously said, that the valuations are something that market tends to give credit for. It's more often not in our control. I think we have chosen to focus on building company with strong fundamentals, good growth, high margins, and turning profitable. When that definitely doesn't seem to be the flavor of the season today, but we see that, and we see that with our customers also. Like a lot of our customers who were used to ordering, let's say, $100 of product with us, are now ordering $300, $400. So the typical spend which companies were deploying in digital native solutions has gone up a lot, and that's reflecting in our growth as well.
That's an important point and an interesting point that you bring up. So let me take that across to Sanjeev first before I get Rajat to come in. Sanjeev, this business about the path to profitability, and I know that whether it's founders who have IPO'd or are waiting in the wings to IPO, or even someone like yourselves, what we often hear from people is it's almost as if it's a switch that's waiting to be turned on. We can at will turn profitable if we want, but the fact of the matter is that that's clearly not the case, at least at this point in time. And it almost seems to be that the profitability is out of fashion in today's sort of tech startup world. But at some point, do you believe that there will need to be a much more focused approach? I mean, Zomato coming out and said, look, we're not going to fall into the trap of quarter tuck performance. But I mean, at the end of the day, the market is going to ask you to justify the valuations based on what you are being able to deliver every quarter.
We ourselves do not, really chase this quarterly sort of performance. So, for example, in our company, there's never a conversation at the beginning of the quarter or even before the quarter ends by what's happened this quarter, what's going to happen this quarter, how much profit, how much growth. We just do what's right for the business. After the quarter is over, the CFO tells us, okay, this is what happened in terms of profit, right? And we didn't know till a week ago what the numbers are going to be. This is for the quarter ended, 45 days ago, right? So you can afford to not be in a trap of quarter to quarter, but look, at least the companies we are in, the company I know well, which have gone public, which is Zomato and Policybazaar, they can actually turn profit with some notice. I'm not saying immediately next quarter, with some notice. It means growth may come off a bit though. It does mean that, right? Zomato has demonstrated that twice in the past 3 or 4 years. It has turned profitable, very nearly profitable. Okay, and then they say, okay, fine, we got enough cash, so now we can invest further on growth. Policybazaar too, it's about they tweak the marketing expenditure a bit, they become profitable. Okay, really the issue is growth versus profit. And my sense is the market and investors who believe in these companies, who have come in, the institutions, they probably believe the 5 to 10 year story, and that's why they're in there. So they're not looking for quarterly profit and quarter numbers from both these companies.
But Rajat, let me address the liquidity factor with you. And as Sanjeev was pointing out, I mean, money is there for the asking at this point in time. You can raise pretty much as much capital as you want. Even as we see the winding down happen globally with central bankers being a little less generous, this is not, the liquidity party is not going to end anytime soon. At least that's the sense one gets. How do you read the tea leaves, so to speak, at this point in time, and what that could mean potentially for the startup space?
So, Shereen, you're right. I would agree with your statement that liquidity is not going to die out anytime soon. And India will continue to be a very attractive market for this space. I think there are various, my own take on this, on financing and on capital availability is that while equity capital is very easily available today with the liquidity, I think other forms of capital are also coming in, Shereen. And so banks have started to look at this much more, perhaps on the back of the equity capital that is coming in. Banks like us, we've set up funds specifically for new age companies. In India, we've set up a fund of about $125 million. It's not really a fund, it's part of our own balance sheet. And we've done that in several other countries as well. So one of the sort of unintended benefits, perhaps, of this bull run, if I may say so, is that traditional financial institutions like banks have also started to look at this space in a very different way. And I like the analogy that Sanjeev gave of growth versus profit. And I really like the way that both Amrit and Sanjeev described the fact that focus on the fundamentals and don't really think about very short-term kind of things and do the right thing. So I feel that whilst there is a lot of, let's say, perhaps excessive amount of capital available at this point in time, which is flowing into the markets, I think it's also led to a structural change in the way that this sector is looked at. I think the government is starting to look at this differently. So, we are talking about very large unicorn companies, but what about the, hundreds, lakhs of startups where MSME schemes or small government guarantees are available so that, founders do not have to mortgage their houses, or at least they get another source of capital. So I think there's a wider movement at play here. And in some ways, I see 2021 as a watershed year for that as well, for a little bit of the maturity of the type of capital that is available outside of equity.
Sanjeev, let's talk about, the domestic capital pool. And while a large chunk of the money that's coming into the startup ecosystem continues to be now start to see the ultra high net worth individuals, startup founders themselves giving back to the ecosystem. In terms of unlocking domestic pools of capital, how much has really changed, and what do you believe the road ahead looks like?
So I think a few things have changed, but if you look at risk capital, early stage equity, right, maybe 80, 85, 90% is still coming from overseas because there has been in the past a venture capital culture, early stage investing culture, angel investing culture, which has got some history of some decades in the West, right? Those are also larger economies with larger pools of capital available. But increasingly, as we see success stories coming out, that look, we went early into Zomato, we made so much, we went early to Policybazaar, we made so much, you are finding a lot of interest among Indian investors in early stage. But it's still only a small fraction of that which is required. So we will remain substantially dependent as an economy for early stage risk capital on foreign sources, with hopefully increasing percentages of domestic sources every year. But it will take a long time to be large enough to say, okay, fine, we can be more than 50% dependent on domestic capital.
Yes, I think that journey, we're just at the start and the beginning of that journey. But Amrit, I want to address that issue with you in a different way. Clearly, as we're hearing both from Sanjeev as well as Rajat, I mean, capital is not a constraint at this point in time for companies that are looking to grow. What do you believe are the key challenges that you face? I mean, we've talked about the headroom for growth, but as you service the market today, what do you believe are the biggest challenges, the constraints that you're facing? Because capital clearly isn't one of them.
But for us, since inception, we have never been constrained by demand as a company. The fundamental value that we offer large companies is we'll get your products made on time, and quality will be perfect. And we largely do that by depending on the depth of the manufacturing network that is there within India already. Now when the demand for manufacturing services is increasing exponentially, supply it's harder to increase supply exponentially, because creating new entities takes time. There's a lot of new incentives that have been set up, whether it's PLI or Indianizing certain sourcing of various commodities. But still, these are cycles which take 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years to fully mature. So for us, and that translates to our value prop as well. Like we fundamentally believe that India is a supply constrained country. End of the day, a lot of the growth of the GDP that we all hope will come in the next decade, it will eventually be boiled to supply, and that's true for us. That's true for e-commerce. That's true for any company. Like we will find it difficult to service the pace of demand acceleration that we are seeing, and the companies who are able to do that well will probably have a larger opportunity to take that winner take all opportunity that is there.
Mm-hmm. But Rajat, to the point that was being made there by Amrit and Sanjeev as well, that while plenty has changed as far as domestic policy is concerned, whether it's government policy or the regulatory framework, what more do you believe will need to be done to ensure that this is a sustainable story, that, the momentum that we are currently seeing, we continue to build on?
Yeah, thanks, Shereen. I think these are heady times, and as everybody has said, enough and more capital is available in such periods of time, and therefore this is probably the best time to think a little more long term. The best names, the unicorns and the sunicorns, etc., if they run a good business model and have good governance, etc., should have a lot of interest from the source which funds this almost entirely, 90%, 95%, which is equity capital, usually from overseas. So I see that story as now being very well established into this industry or into this space. But I think the ability for us to establish other means of financing, perhaps it could be private wealth moving towards this space, increasingly looking at it, and then it could be even the support of banks and governments to the really small bootstrap guys. I think that is probably the need of the hour. So the tone from the top is really good. You have the government and the Prime Minister, everybody kind of talking about this idea. They've launched schemes like the CGT for MSMEs, etc., etc. But if you really want this to be a movement where you have entrepreneurial spirit everywhere, in small towns, villages, everywhere, and you want to really tap into the potential of so many different points of friction which can be solved by startups or ventures of a much more micro scale than the two gentlemen on the screen, then I think you do need to establish a system where these kind of capital provisions get more and more available, because you're not going to find venture capital really available to beyond the fifth or the sixth or the 10th guy in that sector. And there, I think the more formal systems and the more informal systems at the bank and NBFCs and those kind of mechanisms have to take place, because you cannot expect foreign capital to solve every problem other than ones that they can see very clearly and ones that fit into their profile as well. So I think there is a need to establish a broader ecosystem of financing.
Moving beyond financing and talking about the ecosystem at large, Sanjeev, just in terms of the ease of starting up, as well as removing some of the pain points or the points of friction, as Rajat was talking about. We've been talking about tax related issues for years now. Of course, this whole business of registering with the DPIIT and getting a certification and so on and so forth. I mean, this is stuff that continues to be work in progress to some extent. But from an ecosystem perspective, from where you believe we are today, in terms of just the ease of starting up and the ease of doing business, how much has really changed on the ground, and what more needs to be done?
So the government is a complex sort of organization and animal, and as industry has to continuously engage. But increasingly, we are finding that there are champions within the government system of people, ministries, organizations, people, officials, politicians, who really want to push this through. So it's happening, but look, nothing will happen overnight in government of India.
Yeah, so Amrit, let me ask you that 3 years on, you're on the profitability path already, as you pointed out. You're already a unicorn. How are you looking at sort of governance? How are you looking at board capabilities and some of the other issues that perhaps now become more top of mind for you?
Yeah, no, certainly these have been important topics for us from day one. In fact, I do credit having a strong board, directly proportional to some of the success metrics we've got. I think it builds a little bit of discipline, having that rigor of advice, rigor of listening to constructive feedback. Sometimes feedback you don't want to listen and react to that in that positive intent. And we do see some of these trends that you're talking about as well, where companies are not limiting their imagination to just the market that they operate in. And that's certainly true for us also, where today 10% of our revenue comes from the US, but we're servicing all of that from India, where hardly we have a single-digit headcount in the US. And some of this push would have been possible, because the board does encourage you to think about what is the institution that you're creating, and certainly we subscribe to that. We want to build a company that hopefully outlives us and does justice to the entire India opportunity that we're building. And having a good board, having good corporate governance, having thinking about the right things, versus thinking about what could be distractions are increasingly important in today's environment. And that's something which I share freely with other early stage entrepreneurs also who I speak with, that some of these disciplines which companies take 5 years, 10 years to do, it's not a bad idea to do it on day one.
Absolutely, and that tells you about the maturity.
Yes,
Sanjeev, go ahead, please.
So listen, in our case, I think when I look back 24 years ago when we started Naukri, and I had been sort of bootstrapping for 7 years doing other things before that, I think corporate governance first begins in the founder's head or heads, right? If the founder is not straightforward, transparent, honest, does not have high integrity, you can put any kind of structures, any kind of system processes, independent directors, auditors, a crooked founder will find a way, right? So first it starts from there. Now in our case, we were also nudged along. We were honest, but we were nudged along to do a few things by our first investor, ICICI Venture. Whether it was an audit committee, whether it was an external internal auditor, whether it was a big four auditor, whether it was an independent director on the board, they put these 4 things in the shareholder agreement. And then after 6 months, they began to nudge us, say, listen, we had said this, now please do it. Right? One of the best pieces of advice I got was from the first audit partner we had. So we were a tiny company, 3 lakhs a month, and I didn't want to pay more than X for the audit. And ICICI said, we want a big 5. Then there were 5. So I went and met all of the big 5 one by one. I finally stumbled upon Kaushik Datta of Pricewaterhouse, and he said, look, I'll do it in the budget you want, but you allow me to come to a regular fee in the future. I said, sure. And he said, promise me one more thing. You will recognize that, you will tell me the truth, so I don't have to work that hard to second guess you. And number one. Number two is you must understand that your auditor, your independent director, and your CFO are there to save you from yourself. They're on your side, and you've got to understand that. And if you understand that, I'll take your audit. Right? And this is the best piece of advice I ever got. Right? And that's the way it worked. So you went along, and you were fundamentally, honest, and running a clean company. But you went along, taking people with you who gave you contrary advice, contrary opinion, and you were okay with the pushback and the feedback. Right now, what happened? We were sort of gearing up for the IPO, and then we decided that listen, we've got to be regarded as among the best governed companies in India. That became an ambition, right? When you're going public, and so the first thing we said was the minimum independent directors is 33%. We'll go for 50%. Number one. Number two is the chairman will be non-exec. So I stepped aside as chairman. So we did many of the things that people don't normally do, because we wanted to go the extra mile to be well governed and to be regarded as being well governed. And this is an ongoing thing on discussion in our board, in our company, on how we do stuff.
That's something that hopefully others watching this program will take note of as well, that don't just tick the boxes, don't just check the boxes. If you want to build a business to last, then you need to go the extra mile, and you need to prioritize discipline, financial or otherwise. And of course, that's an important anecdote that you've shared with us, Sanjeev. But
I'll say one more. Can I say one more thing? One more anecdote.
Yeah, please.
So listen. We have consistently been regarded as an expensive stock, right? Why is Newage price so high? Why does it get the multiple it does? Now, I don't decide the valuation, right? We don't. We just do our business. So, two independent investors have given me feedback. Sanjeev, according to us, Newage gets a 25% premium for corporate governance. Because we know we might lose money in your stock, but we know you won't lie to us. You won't hide stuff. Now, this is anecdotal. It's two pieces of feedback from two different investors, but who knows? It might be true.
Rajat, I want to talk about what we are seeing, which is this IPO frenzy currently in India. And 2021 has been, a big year as far as the Indian startup space is concerned when it comes to IPOs. Do you believe that this is likely to continue? I mean, we do have a pretty strong pipeline still pending. But more importantly, not just Indian listings, but global listings, as more and more Indian startups look to address global markets. I mean, especially on the SaaS side, what we've seen with the likes of Freshworks. Do you believe that we are going to see this continue through 2022?
Both Indian listings, the amount of interest that we've seen seems to be real. And even offshore listings where the model suits the company and the startup are increasingly being discussed. Other forms of capital, now you've seen some DLBs being done in the market as well. So other forms of capital raising or mezzanine financing, etc. I think you will see more and more of, which was highly, we didn't think of this till perhaps months back, that other forms of financing could also be available other than equity. So I think those things will certainly come to the fore. But if I may just add a slightly different point to your question, Shereen, I think in a discussion with new age companies, I think it's really refreshing for a banker, very traditional, who's coming from a very traditional background, to listen to the talk about do the right thing, sustainable growth, governance, etc. Because if I would make the point that if there's a premium for governance, I think ultimately, if the space is to come to its potential, once that if governance can be trusted, and ultimately you reach a point where there is no premium for governance, and that except a negative premium, I think that's the stage when you can say that the market has matured. So it's been very interesting for me to listen to the anecdotes, but also to the kind of basic values which are very common across all companies, new age or not. So that's the common theme which I found to be fascinating in this discussion.
Yes, there's plenty that's been interesting. But Amrit, since we're speaking about IPOs, is that potentially something that you're working towards?
We're just 3 years old as a company. We set out to solve big problems in manufacturing, and it still feels we have barely scratched the surface. So I do think that this decade is going to be a golden age of manufacturing in India. So that way we have a long runway to go. The specific timelines of when to go public, I think those depend on a lot of other factors. But considering we are so early in our company building journey, I think that's a little time away for us.
Fascinating conversation, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Amrit, and Rajat. Thanks very much for joining us on this edition of The Making. We wish you and your teams the very best of luck, and we hope that we have you back again to talk about the next sort of set of trends that emerge as far as India's startup ecosystem is concerned. But for today, thanks very much for joining us.